The Mannin Line, daily interaction, debate and exchange of ideas. Broadcast on Manx Radio from midday till 1, Monday to Friday.
Pastor Mike, good afternoon. Well, the racing schedule's been delayed for a third time now. Bikes won't leave the grandstand for the solo warm-up till at least midday today. Some low cloud around the Isle of Man and reports of light rain on the mountains. So the rest of the schedule's going to be confirmed in due course. Roads, of course, remain closed, but that's where we are today. And I don't know whether you spotted the news about the TT Supporters Club. Did you see that? Real sad news. The TT Supporters Club says it's decided to suspend its annual membership for the foreseeable future. Normally, the club gives each competitor £50 spending money as a thank you, something which costed about £8,000, but says it can't get the money together anymore. The organisation will still exist as an outlet for selling the ACU Benevolent Fund badges on the Ben's on the Ben fund behalf, along with the backdated Ben Fund badges and clothing. Members who join the club will receive a full refund. Organisers say they'll still send out the 2023 date bars as a goodwill gesture. Sad, really, isn't it? I wonder why it's come to that and how long that's been on the way. And also the news about play centres and play groups. The Deputy Mayor of Douglas, Stephen Crellin, has been inspecting play areas around Douglas. Follows a number of complaints from parents who feel that parks need more maintenance. They're just looking a bit tatty. Well, our local democracy reporter has been talking to just about everybody. She's really got to the bottom of this particular problem with the parks. First of all, let's hear from the Deputy Mayor of Douglas, Stephen Crellin.
It started from a post on Facebook that Mr. Pitts put up with regards to Nobles Park, and within a few minutes of that being put up, I was getting messages from constituents within Pulrose, Annika, Spring Valley, and I had a woman up at Balavarga up the top contacted me. So rather than just sit there and go off what they've just said, I thought I may as well go around and inspect the parks myself personally, take photographs and relay that information back to the director of Regen so she can give me some information to tell me whether there's anything getting done or whether there's stuff in the middle of being ordered. So she did. She came back to me after I'd visited Annika first, then I went to Pulrose, went to Williston, and I went up to Ballafton Meadow up there back where the nursery is. Inspected all them parks. Probably the worst one was probably Annika, so I sort of understood where the people were coming from. It was safe, but there was stuff there that was a bit outdated and was getting a bit worn, to be fair, and needed some repairs. So after speaking to the director of Regen, she said there is stuff ordered for Annika, which is it's getting painted shortly through a tender process. We've also got some safety surfacing being ordered, and there's also new fencing going around there to protect it from dog fowl and stuff like that. A couple of issues that were raised was we had people coming back to us with regards Pulrose and Annika with disabled access and also pram access, because Annika sits in the middle of a field, and of course getting from the main path up into the park itself sometimes can be quite difficult. So had a word with them about that. They're in the middle of looking at that at the moment. Went down to Pulrose. That's the same sort of thing. It's got a small path going in, but there's nothing then, and the ground, even though it's reasonably level, it can be quite difficult for people to get round the park, especially if they're in a wheelchair or wanting to sit. I have noticed a few things around some of the parks with regards to seating. There wasn't enough seating. Some of the parks only had one seat in for a whole family, basically, when there's loads of people sitting there. So I've asked the parks to possibly look at getting some more seating put in some of the parks. I still do have some parks to look around, which is a Cool Road, which is up in the Balavarga estate. There was a major accident there years ago, and they put fencing around it after the boy got knocked over by a car on the main road. So they've done a good job up there. It's all fenced off properly. So I've just got to go and visit that one, see where we are with that one, and then I'll relay that information back to parks. But I can't knock the parks guys, because the parks guys do a real good job, to be fair, and the parks are inspected on a weekly basis. basis, and then they have a rolling programme of maintenance works, and of course that gets picked up by the guys in the Parks Department and done on a regular basis, so I can't really kick them for that, to be fair.
There is Deputy Mayor of Douglas, Stephen Crellin, inspecting the parks and the play areas around Douglas. If you use those and you have something to say, good, brickbat, bouquet, whatever it is you want to say, then please text, email, call or WhatsApp about the state of our parks and facilities for younger people. Just regarding the official TT programme, says Pete, normally it would show events taking place throughout the Isle of Man. There's nothing in it this year. And also got a message in from I think it's Vonnie who sent a message in just to say, I haven't heard any foreign language. I listen to Radio TT and listen for the German commercials about road safety. This year, I haven't heard any. Why isn't Radio TT playing any foreign language German road safety commercials? I'll find out about that. We'll see what happens, Vonnie, but thanks for that. I remember the litter campaign at school vividly as a child. We were talking about people dropping litter and whether or not you can actually... if people want to drop litter, whether they're just the sort of people who will drop litter anyway, and how you can possibly get to them. Is it carrot or stick with them? Do you just say you'll lead a better life if you don't drop litter, or we'll fine you heavily if you drop litter? What do you do? The sort of people... it's antisocial behaviour, and if they're antisocial anyway, they're just the sort of people who will drop litter. You don't drop litter, I know that. I don't drop litter, so you and I are perfect. But what about the people who do drop litter? Howard's with us now. Hi, Howard.
Hello, Andy. Just listening to that chap, the councillor. He's quite right in what he says about the various parks, etc. But I live, as you know, in the Anniker area, and I look out onto the park that's here. And I can look out my front window right now, and the park itself used to be very, very popular. Children of various ages. I asked the Parks Department many years ago when our great-grandson, this is how long ago, he's 11 now, there was no children's swing there. You know, the ones that's like a boxed-in seat.
Yeah, the one that holds them in.
Yeah, and I was told that, this thing's not designed to have one of them on. Well, these are only hanging on a hook, on a chain, and in this last week, they've been up and put one of the child seats there, which was I requested many years ago. So obviously it is capable of having them. It's just that they're so intransigent. They just won't move these things. But also, I don't know how many years it is now since, but right outside our front door, it's only 30 foot from our window, they put up one of these arena football come basketball steel cages, and the children, the younger children, stopped coming down to the park because we had some, they're virtually, we can call them grown men. I know one was over 20 down here playing football, and they were kicking the ball from one end of the field to the other, and it was dangerous for the children, so they've stopped going. And even last week when our great-grandson was around, he said, that's the worst basketball place I've ever seen, he said. And it is actually outside the planning limits because it should have had a protective floor when they put it down, like the rubber floors.
Yeah.
I've seen the plans, and that's what was in the plans, but they tarmacked it. And he said you can't play out there properly. You just got to stand round in a group, which he's quite right in so much. He said it's the worst one I've ever seen. And that was put up a number of years ago by the council and suggested by Councillor Skinner. But to know, even the young fellow, the grandson, said, well, they could have put it up there, Grandad, or over there, there's a lot more room, and it would have been on the flat. Because here, once you move away to the edge of the little court, there's a drop. It falls away about 4 foot. So, in a sense, it's useless. But you can't talk to the council said, ring the Parks Department. you can't talk to the Parks Department because they don't want to listen. They have their own ideas and they will not be moved. They've taken.
What do you mean you can't talk to them?
Well, you can do, but you can talk to them, but you'll get nowhere. It's a brick wall. And even the roundabout that's here, it was jammed with a lump of rope. And the kids, they couldn't move it. And even when I went out with the great-grandson, it was virtually solid. You had to be like Schwarzenegger, whatever his name is, to be able to push the damn thing round. And I rang them up and asked them, could they sort something out? There's nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong. And two big burly fellas come up and they managed to move it a little bit. And then afterwards they came up and took it to pieces. And it's not the Parks Department's fault at that time. It was kids that put rope around the bottom, and this polyurethane or whatever it is, the plastic rope, it was solid. They had to take the plates off and get into it, and it now goes around properly.
Right.
But they denied there was anything wrong with it. There's several parts of the roller balls in there that are rotten. The rubber studs are rotten. And there's been nothing done in any seriousness for many, many years. They used to come up once a week. It was generally on a Monday. I had to walk around, see everything was safe, and go away. And if it needed fixing, it was. But we haven't seen anybody there for ages.
How do you stop, Howard, how do you stop older children or indeed adults from using facilities that are there for kids?
Well, that's a moot point because we used to have a football thing here right in front of the house. If you look on Google, you'll still see the pattern of it. It was a huge cage effect. And they were kicking balls, and they were kicking, and I mean kicking them like they were on a proper football pitch, not in a restricted area. And I had cause to call the police because we're getting abuse of them. What do the police do? They come up and play football with them. So it makes you wonder, is it worth it, or you just sit down and crawl into a hole because they don't seem to want to do anything about it. And
what does your elected representative say? What do the councillors say?
I haven't heard them. I haven't seen them. Ever since they were elected, they went in unopposed, and we haven't heard a word from them. So I know a couple of the various councillors in there that will, Stephen Pitts is one of them, and a couple of others, but the rest of them, well, you'll get no sense out of them, and they just don't seem to be particularly bothered. It's sad, but that's the people that are there today.
What's the newest piece of equipment on the park, Howard?
The arena, the football, basketball, it's a steel wall with round steel bars at the back of it, and then hanging over the front is it is only a steel ring. They're all over the place. But this one here is in the wrong place, and it was the plans drawn up. I've seen the plans. You can go on the internet and see the plans, but it was designed to go here. But it's, as I say, it's 30 foot from the front of our windows, and you get the children down. They're sensible, but we still get the adults down, and they're kicking the ball around like they're in the middle of Wembley Stadium, and it's frightening. And sometimes the language it leaves a lot to be desired. But when they first put this park here, and it's ideal for the children for playing in it, they put benches here, and they planted something like 20 trees. There's not a bench left, or there wasn't after several months, and there's one tree that survived.
Well, they were vandalised.
Yep, every one of them. They were going to make it into a pleasant area where you could come and sit, but the younger generation, they've all grown up now, because this is 20, 30 years ago, but the tree now is virtually full grown, and that's the only one that survived. The rest were destroyed, and the park benches were destroyed. So it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. The area is becoming decimated, and it's a sad reflection on what it used to be.
Okay. All right, Howard, I appreciate that. Thanks for calling.
Take care. Bye now.
All right, 21 minutes past 12. The Fun Fair is now selling fast food. For many years, they weren't allowed to take trade away from Manx outlets. So why is this happening at the moment? Text 235. Have you been to the Fun Fair? What do you think about it all? How are things going at the moment there? Have you been on? Is it £5? £5 a ride, I think, at the moment. Well said, Mr. Crellin. It's not the most important problem in Douglas, but it is a very needy one, says Tony. This is the story of the play areas around Douglas. Deputy Mayor Stephen Crellin's been around to take a look. Follows a number of complaints from parents who feel parks need more maintenance. A note in from John, who just said, the amount of complaints I've heard about the stench on the prom, it's disgusting. It's worse than ever. The beach race was on Douglas yesterday. I hope all the competitors had a tetanus shot, says John L. It was busy, wasn't it, last night with the beach race yesterday? Andy, or is it Dave? Anyway, in Ramsey, I've not seen any Lynx Fahren. Are there any Lynx Fahren or Roulé Gauche signs at the moment this year for TT, the foreign language representation? And have you heard any foreign language commercials yet? Well, Vonnie said she hasn't at the moment. Watch out, by the way. And this is from Justin, who says, let's have a look here. If you didn't see this, please watch it. Ask the listeners. Please ask an appropriate MHK to come and chat to you about what they're going to do to regulate the food industry. This is all about Panorama last night. Did you see what was on Panorama? I didn't see it. If you saw it, then by all means do get in touch. I've also got to say hi to Arabella Russell. Arabella Russell. She is spending, a young lady, spending all her TT school holidays, because of course it's race week, it's half term. She's spending all her TT school holidays on Lazer Road collecting money. She's rattling buckets for Animals in Distress Isle of Man. So if you see Arabella on the Lazer Road with a bright red T-shirt with a says Animal Rescue on the front, then by all means give her all our best. And let's hope she raises plenty of money. More from Stephen Crellin. This is the Deputy Mayor, Stephen Crellin, who's been... He briefly mentioned access. This is disability access for playgrounds and parks.
Disabled access these days is quite important. It doesn't matter where you are, whether it's a park, a swimming pool, it doesn't matter where you go in the world today. It's part of the Equalities Act at the end of the day, so you have to ensure, there is disabled access or there's some form of access so people can get in. It's not too bad on flat areas. The grass is maintained and it's a solid surface. People can get around the parks quite easy, but if you've got a park that's on a bit of an incline, it's better if you have some form of solid path to be able to get round to the outside of the park itself. Even just being able to get to the seating areas and be able to sit down and have a meal and basically watch the kids. Yeah, it is quite important. They do look at that when they're doing a scheme anyway. They always look at the access provisions. All I would say to people out there, don't be frightened to report anything at any of the parks. Speak to the parks department. If you think it's an issue, give them a ring. Somebody will come down and have a look, and we'll certainly try and get it fixed as quick as we can. And if it's going to be a major issue, we'll seal off that bit of equipment until we can get some.
There he is, Stephen Crellin, Deputy Mayor, talking about the parks. Charlie says Stephen Crellin sounds like a decent guy. Would he come up to Williston Crescent and have a look at our public footpath that someone in the town hall's closed off out of spite and meanness? So I don't think they'd say that. We've had one MHK who hasn't done anything about it. The DOI only think about how to take money off the public instead of doing the jobs, says Charlie as well. Somebody's going to break a leg, the state the broken pavements are up in Williston. So will they please look at that? Mr. Wannenberg has been talking about electric buses. The trial of electric buses on the Isle of Man has raised the eyebrows of John Wannenberg MHK. It was revealed each electric bus would cost £500,000. A Mercedes E-Citaro has previously roamed the roads, and another electric bus is currently being trialled during TT. Have you spotted the electric bus? In a post on social media, the chair of the Climate Transformation Board says it can do up to 200 miles before needing to recharge. But Douglas North MHK John Wannenberg spoke to Manx Radio and says he thinks it's not the right time to be even thinking about electric buses.
We've got so many pressures around today, which everybody knows about. To spend £500,000 on a bus is obscene.
The Climate Transformation Fund is something that has very significant amounts of money being poured into it, and when it was developed in the 2022 budget, £43 million was allocated. Now that figure's been topped up essentially in the most recent fiscal plan. Some people must be sat wondering why, if the money's there to be used on climate-related things, then why not use it?
Well, yes, why don't we spend it? But let's spend it on things which really count, right? Let's get some solar panels, let's get the wind turbines going. Let's do something which is really worthwhile. But to buy £500,000 buses, I just cannot understand why this is even considered at the moment. You know, I'm not to say that in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, this may be the case, and they'll probably be a lot cheaper. But here and now, that's absolutely nothing that I would support.
And something we hear regularly from listeners is too few charging points. And, well, given a bus is a working vehicle, it wouldn't be feasible for it to just stop off mid-trip to recharge.
The whole infrastructure network needs to be looked at if we're going to have a fleet of electric buses, and even those words coming out of my mouth I struggle with. There's a lot more work that needs to be done before we go along this route, and it's not a pun at all. It shouldn't even be considered at the moment. No, there's far more pressing things to be worrying about.
So why do you think these electric buses are even being trialled?
Well, why indeed? It's virtue signalling of the highest order. Maybe they're putting a red herring across, but it's nothing that should be seriously considered at the moment. I mean, really. I mean, look around. People are hungry and cold. Cost of living is going through the roof. Inflation's going through the roof. Mortgages are going up. And now here we are talking about buses, electric buses. No.
John Wannenberg, MHK, talking about why we are talking about the buses. A message in just to say there's a lot of litter around Douglas at the moment. This is being caused by gulls and birds picking stuff out of bins and dropping it, particularly bad around Castlemona Avenue and Central Prom. I also got a message from Tammy, says there are quite a lot of litter bins that aren't being emptied. And I suppose if you spot a bin that isn't being emptied, you could call the relevant council wherever you are to get it emptied. They normally are quite hot on that at this time of the year, but they'd probably like to know if there are overflowing bins where you are. And Julian's on. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, I was listening this morning to John Wannenberg speaking about the electric bus. Bringing it here for trials is just virtue signalling. I wonder, virtue signalling to who? I suspect the who is also the people that are responsible for the ESG, or that environmental, social and corporate governance scoring system that seems to be permeating just about every Western government, large corporation and business recently. But as far as I agree with Mr. Wannenberg on the electric bus, I completely disagree with him in his assertion that the Manx taxpayers' £40 million should be spent on wind turbines and solar panels. Especially in light of a recent research paper by Wade Allison. He's an emeritus professor of physics at Oxford University. And his new research paper shows the futility of wind power very clearly. And that research paper is called "The Failure of Wind as a Reliable Source of Electrical Energy." And I'd urge anyone that wants to look at that research paper to just have a look at the first two graphs, because they're very revealing.
Well, can you pray see what do the graphs say?
Well, all the wind turbines that have been deployed on and offshore across the whole of Europe and the UK at huge expense and massive devastation to the environment, whether it be the seabed or land, barely produced a tenth of the electrical demand, let alone the far larger heating demand provided by coal, oil, gas and nuclear to the people of Europe and the UK. And it sort of reflects the situation in the UK that we've had since the gas crisis started, when the electrical prices shot up. And you've got to ask the question, why did the electrical prices shoot up when we've deployed 11,500 wind turbines at a cost of £200 billion? How successful were they at stopping the electrical price increases when gas went up?
Well, it's fair to say over 10 years, prices for nothing go down, do they? So prices were always going to go up. Or am I being incredibly naive by thinking that prices for utilities are ever going to go down?
And yet you had the situation recently in Finland where they've had to lower the output of nuclear power stations that they've deployed because they were so efficient that it was getting too cheap.
Well, let's look at our situation on the Isle of Man. We are hamstrung by the fact that there's a large amount of debt attached to the power station. So
correct.
The user, the customer, you and me, we are paying for not just electricity, but we're paying for debt.
And that does raise another question in my mind, because the cost of the power station originally, I think it quadrupled in price, didn't it? Initially, it was mooted at around £45 million, and it ended up being 150 million. But the root cause of that appeared to be the chap that was asked to do it might profit. And now his name is being bandied around now about wind turbines on the island. I don't understand that. It's only 16 years ago, but how come he's involved in this? I'm sorry to have to put names there, but I mean, a lot of people asked a lot of questions about what went on with that debt.
Regarding wind and regarding solar, then, if you had to choose between wind or solar, which would you choose for the Isle of Man, Julian?
Geothermal.
That wasn't the question.
Well, we're sitting on, we never hear from anybody that actually wants to sit on the radio and tell us why we can't have geothermal. We just everyone seems to be abiding by the IPCC report and the ARUP report. As I said to you before, the IPCC report, when you look at it, 27,000 words of uncertainty. Yeah. There's 6,000 maybes. It's 9 words of uncertainty per page across 3,068 pages.
Well, the only thing I'll say about, in between, and I'm putting up wind and solar against each other, and as you mentioned, wind power, and particularly offshore, leaves enormous lumps of concrete. Let's just say for the sake, as an academic exercise, let's just say they decided wind power hadn't worked, and wasn't going to work in the future. Decommissioning wind turbines is expensive. It's a big process, and it leaves large lumps of concrete in the seabed. If suddenly you decided solar power didn't work, solar panels are relatively easy to decommission. So, these arrays that they put in fields, taking them away is relatively easy. You don't have to dig them down. They're not in concrete blocks, and the land is it's not polluted because, they're just things that sit on the land. So, I just wonder, whether or not solar power, whether the government should be racing forward with solar power. Remember, they're committed to it, Julian. They've said that we're going to decarbonise our electricity, and as yet, there's nothing on the Isle of Man. You've got the place up in Derby that's is generating a lot of Tesla power with its solar panels, but as yet there are no plans, offshore or onshore, for the Manx government to get involved in wind power.
Well, as far as solar is concerned, a couple of things that come to mind. When you deploy solar, you need even more land than you do wind. So the area that's been talked about for Castletown area is good arable land. Well, when you put solar panels all over it, guess what's going to happen to the usage of that land? And, there's a lot of question marks about our food security on the island. You've also got the diurnal nature of solar. It doesn't work at night, and it doesn't work in the winter hardly at all. And it costs an absolute fortune and is difficult to service if you track the sun with them, because you're using energy to move all those things. Yeah. Imagine 84 acres of solar panels all tracking. Imagine all those motors. If any of them go wrong, There's all kinds of things. We live in the northwest of Europe where we tend to get more cloud because you've got the warm, moist air coming up from the Atlantic meeting the Arctic air. So,
it's just that, Julian, we have no momentum, that nothing seems to be happening. There's nobody racing forward. And even if they're racing forward in the wrong direction, there doesn't seem to be any impetus, any urgency.
Well, as Ewan correctly said, the current trajectory will mean we will lose our base load, which means we will go back before the Industrial Revolution, because nobody's talking about a solution to how we keep our power on. I mean, you imagine if you start having load-shedding blackouts like South Africa's having now.
But Julian, the companies, the big international companies, Isle of Man, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they simply wouldn't stand for it. The big e-gaming's 20% of the Manx economy, and if they don't get clean electricity, if they don't get things to run their data centres and their racks and racks of computers, they simply won't be here. And the government surely wouldn't take that risk.
You see, if we're going to go down the road of getting rid of what you might call fossil fuels, which I don't agree with anyway, because, we've talked about CO2 is not a pollutant, it's actually a plant food, but, people will argue with me, but the other alternatives are going to be nuclear, which is expensive, but again, and you have to think about the waste, or at least have a conversation about geothermal. Larderello, 120 years that's been running, and it's extremely clean, if you want to call it clean. It doesn't really put anything out, and it's almost infinite in its energy source. The problem is difficult to charge people, and it's not something that's to the vagaries of market forces or wars or anything else.
Well, and that's the point. The public, the layperson, the consumer is caught between government regulations, whether regional, national, international governments, multinational, pan-European, worldwide governments and regulations, and big business. So we will always get squeezed in the middle. So it's up to us to pipe up and say something.
Yeah, imagine geothermal is a two-edged sword as well, because not only do you have heat energy from it, which could be used for district heating like they do in a lot of places, but it also can be used for electrical generation. So imagine if we had an island that could have all our heating and electrical generation provided by geothermal, and we could just sell off the gas.
Okay, all right.
To whoever needs it.
Appreciate it, Julian. Thanks for calling today.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
All right, good to talk to you. David's on now. Hi, David.
Hi, Andy. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Which way are we going? Are we actually going to Douglas? Are we going to Ramsey? Are we going to Peel or whatever?
It will be just nice to know. Everybody seems to say warm words, but what are we going to do?
Yes, there's nobody actually telling us or giving us a steer or telling us the truth on which way it's going to go. And I was just going to ask you then, which Timble, when the Green Initiative group came on, when is that report going to Timble or going to, I think they said Timble, didn't it?
There's one left and then it's going to be September.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's great to bring something forward and then we have a recess, don't we? So nothing will be done for half a year again till Timble comes back in October, September, October there. So then we've missed another season. I'm looking out the window here now. My PV evacuating tubes are making hot water, no problem at all. And where the guy comes on for about geothermal, proven technology is, I know you may come back and say there is, but it's not around the world there, is PV panels on the roof. Like you say, you can move them. In about, I think it's a day, we'll have some PV panels in the location in Uncan. And I hope then is to monitor that. There's 10 panels being put up, which will give us either electricity back to the network, or it'll go into the building, or it will go to heating and hot water for showers. So why can't we get on a road? And I've said it before, how many schools have we got? How many schools are going to lie empty from when the kids go off on holiday till they come back? All that power can be generated, shoved onto the grid, and get out there. We need to team up with somebody and say to them, if there's somebody listening out there to say, if these electricians are involved with PV, big multinational companies, base yourself on the Isle of Man. Let's give them some initiative and let's get the cost down and get them on.
Okay, all right. Thanks for calling today.
See you, bye.
All right, good to hear from you. Nice to hear a politician talking sense, says Des, after what Mr. Wannenberg had to say about electric vehicles. Anybody seen the state of the Marine Hotel on Loch Prom? The roof's partially fallen in. Surely Douglas Borough Council should be made to do something about this, not just ignore it. Who's the councillor for that area? Said John. They do have a dilapidations officer who no doubt probably knows all about that, but we wait to see.
Roses are blooming at Ramsey Garden Centre, and with a variety of hanging baskets, summer bedding, fruit and ornamental trees, plus a full range of garden essentials, there's never been a better time to visit Ramsey Garden Centre. Open 7 days a week.
True Manx. That's the TT. World-class racing that could only happen here. And ShopRite's the Manx supermarket like no other. It's where the riders shop. Great value food and drink and the biggest choice of local produce anywhere. Plus all your favourite brands as well as the best of Sainsbury's. Whether you're camping or staying in style, you'll find everything you need to make this TT your best ever at ShopRite. Open 8 till 9 Monday to Saturday, 9 till 6 on Sunday.
It's good to talk. It's how we get things done. So when you apply for a personal loan from Black Horse, you'll get support from one of our relationship managers who's there to talk you through your application. You could borrow up to £50,000 with up to 7 years to pay it back, and you could receive your money within 24 hours of approval. Ready to talk? Go to blackhorseoffshore.co.uk to request a call back today. Finance subject to status. Applicants must be 18 or over.
Sport has a new home on social media for Manx Radio, where you can keep up to date with all the latest sporting action on the Isle of Man. Our new dedicated Manx Radio Sports Facebook page is now live, bringing you all the latest sports news and features. So whether it's motorsport, FC Isle of Man, Manx football, rugby, hockey and much more besides. Make sure to like and follow Manx Radio Sport on Facebook for all the latest updates. On air and online, this is your home for sport on Ireland, the nation station, Manx Radio.
Mannin Line. 17 minutes before 1. Jude in Port St Mary says, my child will soon be celebrating his 21st. The pirate ship in Castletown's Polson Park was taken down when he was at school. It was never replaced. Near the Southern 100, there are 2 sets of rusty swings and a football pen and cage for children to play on. A dreadful. Needs improvement desperately, says Jude in Port St Mary. I just wonder how expensive are children's playgrounds. It's a shame Bus Vannin, texter 492, says it's a shame Bus Vannin hasn't run extra buses over the TT. Yesterday, the buses between Peel and Douglas were so full, people were left waiting for the next one. Earlier this year, the regular service on the route was reduced from 3 buses an hour to 2, which this week just isn't sufficient. And Bonzo's on now. Hi, Bonzo.
Pointedly yet again to Julia and John Wannenberg et al. In any excuse to bash anything that might smack of actually making some action, against the issues of climate. So let's get rid of a few falsehoods, shall we, or certainly a few misrepresentations. Geothermal on the Isle of Man. Well, it isn't hot enough, essentially. Juan and others point to this place in Italy. Well, I'm not quite sure if Juan and Julia managed to do basic geography, but I wonder if he's aware of what are in Italy. Any guesses of what are in Italy besides pasta and fountains and things?
Volcanoes.
Absolutely. It has volcanoes and it has earthquakes. It is highly geologically active. So putting a geothermal power source or heating source nearby one of these things is absolute child's play, which strangely enough is how it got done 120 years ago. So that's like saying, yes, let's drill for oil because it's bubbling up through the sand. Yeah, that's silly.
So you don't think it's worth just taking a punt, digging some geothermal people or some geologists say it could work, we think it's going to work. If you don't think it's worth it, remember, one of these electric buses is $500,000, so for 2 buses we could do a test bore for geothermal that may or may not work, but if it works, we'll be quids in.
Well, so long as we're not paying for it. This is a thing onto other things which I'll come on in a moment. But if these people want to take a punt and say, right, we want to develop geothermal energy, can we please drill a trial well? We'll pay for it. Fine. If it's, can we drill a trial well, and the Isle of Man government or MUA will pay for it? Well, no.
But,
we don't. We simply don't have the money for these things.
But they would only. I mean, that would be fine if somebody wanted to put 6 figures of their own money into it. They'd surely want a user agreement and a guarantee of saying, look, if we provide X amount of steam per year, we need a guarantee that you're going to buy it because they want a return on investment.
Yes, but we need to see the stuff first. I mean, there's no user agreement for Kroger or something for them to. They're actually funding it, even though they shouldn't be doing it. But they're funding it. They're not saying to the Manx taxpayer, "Oh, right, fine, we want the drilling costs from you." So yeah, that's specious, and especially when you have queues of people who are waving money, saying, "Shut up and take my money," to actually place renewables on the island and on and offshore. I mean, you have now the new sponsor for Bushy's Village and the stage, Orsted, who I think are getting nearer and nearer, although I think the main problem is Manx government inertia, to actually getting those wind turbines in the Irish Sea on Kroger, and we actually starting to get that kind of money from seabed leasing that we need, 150 million a year.
That's one of the points, that a rising tide floats all boats. If we start to see hundreds of millions of pounds coming from Orsted, then suddenly any opposition will simply melt away.
Well, quite. And also in the question of onshore renewables as well. People are saying, oh, there's no plan, we don't see any plans. Well, MUA, I think, will tell you that they've had a wide variety of submissions for renewable schemes. But those are awaiting on the publication of an energy policy, which comes from DEFRA. And that is supposed to be, and I think you heard me questioning Claire Barber on this when she was on Mannin Line, that I hoped to see it before the summer recess, placed before Tynwald.
Well, the huge solar farm that's been proposed for Bilown, I think that's gone to planning. I don't know how long it's going to be before they'll know whether that goes ahead. But the Peel Group have got solar farms and they've got wind farms. The Peel Group is very well versed in new types of energy, so that would appear ready to go. It's almost oven ready.
Well, I think having Peel Group control yet another aspect of Manx life is something we really ought to avoid. And the 30 megawatts is supposedly from the solar array near Castletown. That will mostly be going to heat the cannabis farm. It won't be going to the public supply. It'll only be using the transmission network to take the power from there up to its cannabis plant.
Oh, this is the place that's going to be on the Cool Road, isn't it, by Fort North?
Yeah. Yes, that's right. So you have all these other people. All right, well, we can say that Peel is with these other onshore renewable people in the aspect that they will be paying for it. And all the time, I've always been advocating with climate action, yeah, great. It's great. Get someone else to pay for it. because we can't afford those kind of capital costs. And John Warrenber is right in one sense, in that £500,000 for a double-decker electric bus is a kind of bit beyond our wallet. However, the thing is that I believe public sector transport vehicles in Europe are not going to be available with internal combustion engines after 2030, is it? So, seeing as by far and away most buses are made in Europe, and the only people who don't really make buses in Europe are Wright Bus, and they're in Northern Ireland, so they're kind of half and half in the EU and not anyway. And indeed, I think the electric bus that we're trialling is a Wright Bus one. So these people are all transferring to electric power for the buses. And I think it must also be remembered that we shouldn't, if we do buy the things outright, then that's another thing that needs looking into. I think what we are on is something like your typical car agreement. Like a sort of personal leasing plan, where we lease the things for 3 years, and either we can then buy them at an agreed value, or we then, give them back to Mercedes, and they then sell them on, and then they give us a new bus. So whether we're on that kind of cycle, I don't know, so that we have to really prepare for electric buses because of the fact you won't be able to get an internal combustion engine bus. But when it comes to the operation of these things, yes, it's being trialled. There's a reason why it's being trialled, to see if it's viable or not. The single-decker electric buses, yes, those I think are operable. The problem with the double-decker bus, of course, is the additional weight. And how that affects range and stuff. I mean, that's okay in cities where it's all flat, or mostly flat. But in our terrain, a double-decker electric bus may not make sense, whereas a single-decker one will.
It's fair to say, Bonzo, that most people listening now, most people who vote, most people in society don't really care about the machinations of how things arrive. They don't care how their bread's baked. They don't care how their electricity comes to them. They just want to get on with life. But we have politicians and we have people advocating a different way of life who are wanting us to put our faith in them. And do you think that those people, those politicians, the people who are advocating a green agenda for the future, a net zero future, do you think those people at the moment are deserving of our faith?
Here we go again. We're talking about it in terms of belief, in faith. Oh, do people believe in climate change in the same way as...
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who will be making the money out of it. Because behind this, obviously, there's a worldwide agenda moving towards net zero. Nobody's arguing with that. Nobody's arguing about the fact that we need a greener and more pleasant planet. It's the people who are making the money out of it and the politicians who are advocating this who want our faith. They want our vote. They want us to go along with it. And obviously, we hear on a microcosm on Mannin Line, we hear people who don't buy into it. I'm not saying, I'm not evincing an opinion either way, but it is not entirely unopposed, Bonzo. So I just wonder, with the lack of momentum, whether or not this is progressing as they would want.
Well, I would certainly agree that there's a profound lack of momentum, and I think that is because in terms of those who are advocating climate action, they haven't really been advocating it aggressively enough in government. There's been a lot of wishy-washying and, we must try and come to something, and everything just gets bogged down in the swampland.
And that's my point, in that the layperson, the ordinary voter, just raises their eyebrows and says, "Oh, it's the politicians again."
Well, to a certain extent, I agree with that, but I think what we need to see is therefore pressure on the politicians to actually, and elements of the administration, to actually pull their fingers out and do some action this day, not action this decade.
Okay. Bonzo, always appreciate your opinions. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Bye.
All right, it's 5-1 on Manx Radio for Mannin Line today. The racing at the moment, I think, is still under delay. You can get all the information by going to the best biking station in the world on AM 1368 and also on our various smart devices. The play park on Peel Headlands is unmaintained. One toddler swing broken. It was just taken away and never replaced. Also, there are exercise machines in the same children's park which have never been looked after. They're now full of rust. This is at Peel Headlands. We often wonder where our rates are spent around the town centre. It looks very run down. The Commissioner's properties on the prom have needed painting for years. And let's face it, Peel has an increasing amount of rates every year. They're not stopping, are they, in Peel, building new houses? Every property contributes the rates. Message in from Janet. She says, Andy, it makes more sense to use a double-decker bus on the Isle of Man because there'll be more people to get out and push when it runs out of power. I don't think that's the approach they're looking for. Let's hope it doesn't run out of juice heading up the mountain. Christy D's on the way after 1 o'clock on Manx Radio. 1 to 3 it is. Oh, and remember, next Tuesday, a week today, we're going to be live at Castle Rushen High School with the students in Castletown. That's it. Thanks to Howie on the phones today. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Where's the sunshine?
WINT